Hello and welcome to The W Word with me, Anna Whitehouse, and the brilliant Kimberley, our resident expert.
Hi there, I'm Kimberley Wilson, chartered psychologist and author of How to Build a Healthy Brain, and I am here to bring the science and the facts to the wellness world.
So this podcast, it's really about, I'm going to say the words deep diving, sound a bit like David Brent, but we're going to deep dive into the world of wellness and kind of reclaim it because it's become a little bit of a buzzword. But this podcast would not be possible without Arla LactoFREE, which is about giving you inner strength to just be the best version of yourself and just give you kind of inner strength to come over like the big things that happen and the small things, like me currently eye twitching because I literally haven't slept because my children won't sleep through the night. But anyway, leaving that aside, we have got a really special episode today. We're going to be taking on a wellness trend, which actually, to be fair, isn't a trend as much as like an ancient practice that's been carried around the globe for centuries, from ancient Greece to Tibet, and it is sound healing. And I've tried it, and if I don't look zen, I don't know what, but it works. Now, before we get into that, I would love to introduce our guest, who is someone I have followed really closely and creepily online and in real life. You're safe.
And you're still talking to me.
I'm still talking to you. She is no stranger to music. She is a singer, a presenter, and former member of classic Naughty's band, Hearsay. Had you on my wall, just so you know. It is, of course, Myleene Klass. Hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so good to have you.
I've got an eye twitch as well, that one. Don't know what it is. Like, they just want to wake up and just remind you that you don't need to sleep.
You sort of get to the point where you're like, can you see it? Can you see the eye twitch? It's throbbing.
It's definitely there. It's that one.
Well, when we last met, just before we get into this, my daughter interviewed Myleene. My daughter was 4 years old, and I remember she was like, "What's your favourite colour, Myleene?" And
She was good. She went straight in.
You basically sat there and gave it maybe 3 or 4 seconds too long to think, and she cut you up and just said, "What's your favourite colour?"
Oh my.
She was strong. She was good. She was good.
So how has lockdown been for you? What was your experience?
I think it's been, the best way to describe it is it has been quite up and down, because there are some days when I think this is really, really great. I'm at home with the family. This is time we wouldn't necessarily have had together. I haven't missed a single smile, a first step with my baby. I don't even remember the last time I expressed, because I'm just always present, which is really wonderful to be able to feed him. And it's just been a really lovely time. And then homeschooling hit, and I realised I was just not going to make it because it was terrifying. My daughter came up to me. She said, "Well, how do I subjugate this Latin verb?" And I just withered in the corner because I thought, I don't know. At the time, I thought we had 2 weeks of it, and now 4 months later, I don't know how we got through it. So there definitely been times when I thought, this is, a really good opportunity for the family here. And there are other times where I just thought, this is a real struggle. When the Wi-Fi went down, I thought it was game over. The homeschool. Well, nobody could do anything. And that, one of my children needed to get on with the homeschooling, and then my boyfriend's working and I'm trying to work. And it was a lot on the house. Yeah. And then my friend, who is one of the chief nurses in one of the hospitals in London, I'd speak to her, and then I just think, do you know what? Get an absolute grip and let's go again tomorrow, because she was right in the thick of things.
Yeah, I think we got to a point where I was kind of throwing sandwiches into the TV area and just going, "You can't watch any more YouTube, only Netflix." And just packaging that up as Key Stage 2 English.
Well, I'm part of a WhatsApp group with the mums, and we actually did find a way around it for us, because the homeschooling was a big deal, and we made music classes, me and my girls, because that was something that I knew we could do. So we kind of ignored all the other classes, but we went full on with the music classes. And so we took on that side of the homeschooling. And do you know what? That's been quite special, because I think to have that with your girls, that, for me to have had that, I would never have had that time.
What would you say were the sort of peak and the trough of your experience in lockdown? Like, what was the high and the low?
I think it's just the uncertainty and the fear at the beginning, because I think for me, I was going into work from the off. That was really quite terrifying because nobody knew anything. So I didn't know. And it was at the time when people were making banana bread and panic buying loo roll, which now we look back and we're like, well, what was that all about? But at the time it was very real, and the shelves were bare, and I would go into work and I'd sit there and I would just cocoon myself because I wouldn't know if I could touch anything. And then we'd get messages through from people saying, your voice is the only voice I've heard because I haven't got any family. So you would feel that you were doing something good. And then I'd get back into the car and I'd go home and I'd take everything off because I didn't know if I could touch the children and how much I had to wash, but then I didn't want to pass on the fear. And so it was just a really uncertain time. And then it moves forward to the DIY haircuts, which were just epic, because I then decided, do I need to really work as a broadcaster when I am Nikki Clark? So I then had a sort of, maybe I should have a career rethink because I'm really good at this.
As your husband comes out with half his hair shaved off.
I did a really good haircut and I got that false confidence and bleached his hair and it started going that sort of greeny tinge. And then I rang up all my hairdresser friends, realised I shouldn't be the next Nikki Clark, and it was all business as normal. So you go through those. I had a clear out of the house. I did all those things as well. And then I got really bored of clearing out the house. And you think I'll drop everything to charity shops, and then you realise all the shops are closed. So I just went through everything that everybody else was going through.
It's when you get to the cutlery drawer and you're realigning the cutlery drawer that you're like, I need to just put the things down. So you just mentioned a couple of times like that you did music lessons in lockdown, and that when you were broadcasting, you have people sort of saying it's really good to hear your voice. So do you believe like music and sound has healing properties?
I think that everything around us, everything is toned. If you bang into something or if you're speaking, you speak on a tone. The first thing you hear when, as a baby is your mum's voice, and the humming is those vibrations are what send you to sleep. You sing lullabies. It's such a natural progression. And I think, again, when people say, I'm not from a musical family, it's not really something that's in my life, you cannot escape it. It's all around you. If you're coming together for a celebration, everyone sings happy birthday, everyone knows the words to that. If you're going through a breakup, you play sad songs all by myself, and then maybe just me. Then you move on to I Will Survive, and they just become anthems that people recognise because they just bring people together. And I think as well that if you're watching a movie, there are certain signals that will say, well, the baddie is coming here, and it gives you a cue as to how to feel. And it's the same reason that if you then use a different song, it'll give you a cue to feel happier, because you just know that it's almost got those switches. For me, music is something that is a universal language.
Has it always been there from when you were little? Because where did you grow up?
So on my dad's side, we're from 6 generations of classical musicians. So it's just music was just always there. But what has changed is my musical taste. So I wanted to play Kylie, he wanted to play Wagner. And it was really unfair because Wagner can go on for 5 hours. So when we were driving to go to see my nan in Ross and Wye, we'd have like a 2.5-hour journey, and I wouldn't really get to play anything. But I wouldn't get the locomotion on. But then you then very, very quickly realise actually how lucky am I to have had that exposure to so many different styles of music. So if you ask my well, she's now 9, she had a birthday lockdown. If you ask my 9-year-old the kind of music that we listen to, I like that she won't just give you something that has just been fed in. It'll be everything from Dolly Parton through to Disney, through to Hans Zimmer from the movies. It's just lots of different genres. And I think it just gives you sort of that all-round idea of what music does.
Well, it's like what you've done. You're accomplished classical musician. I've done obviously my Wikipedia-ing.
Very kind.
And actually just been stalking you all my life. And you're in Hearsay. So to be honest, what you were saying about your dad, Wagner and Kylie.
I got the job in Hearsay because the rehearsal pianist didn't show up.
Did you?
So people have their ideas of how do you get that cut through? Did you sing better than anyone else? No. Did you dance better than anybody else? I doubt it. But there was one day the rehearsal pianist was late and everyone was plutzing, and they all had their music and what we're going to sing and how. And I was like, I'll play it for you. And I remember Nigel walking in and seeing me play, and he said, you never said you could play. And I said, you never asked. And I ended up playing on A Bridge Over Troubled Water and playing Wembley. I played Wembley on my piano. I remember coming up through the floor feeling like Elton John, but it kind of didn't work for a while because I was just ahead, because obviously you're sitting down, so the piano had to rise. And then, to be able to this is what I'm saying. I never said I was the best or the worst. I just love music, and it's taken me around the world. I've played for royalty, and I've also played with tribes in Micronesia. I took a piano to the Yap Islands and I left it there. It's quite random.
What? Sorry, like just take it back a bit there. So you took a piano.
I took a piano on a light aircraft, landed in Nagasaki, lost a few parts in customs, and took what was remaining of the piano to the Yap Islands and set it up on the beach and wrote. Bono would have loved it. I wrote a piece with a tribe from the Yap Islands.
Where can we find this?
If you Google singing in the rainforest, you will find me and loads of Mog Islanders singing.
Where is the piano now?
It's still on the Yap Islands because nobody wanted to take it apart and put it back on the light aircraft. We were like, no. And the TV company said, you have to bring it back. It's part of the expenses. And we, as a group, as the crew, said, we will chip in to not bring it back.
So where did you leave it?
On the beach.
On the beach.
On the beach, we wrapped it up. We showed them we showed the tribe how to look after it. And at night, because there was no light whatsoever, and we saved the generators for our filming. I just used a torch and I taught some of the children the basic chords, because everyone knows if you learn C, F, G, and A minor, you can form a band and you're good to go. You can play any song.
I just love this idea that there's going to be generations of people on that island who have this piano and are able to create music.
Yeah.
And
They're probably just going to be
something.
singing Hearsay.
They'll be singing Pure and Simple for generations to come, and that is my gift to the island of Mog, because nobody had really not a lot of people don't know about the Yap Islands. They're so obscure. And then to get onto the island, you have to speak to the tribe and have meetings with the tribe and the elders, and then they decide if you can or can't come. So we had meetings. I felt like, I don't know, I felt like Cook discovering the islands, because we had to stay in the boat. We had to stay down, hiding under the piano, and because it's seen as an attack if you stand up. So I was really little until they said we could come onto the island and roll the piano on.
You've had such different audiences, like Wembley, right the way through to an island. But regardless of audience, whether it's your daughter or whether it's Wembley Arena, do you feel relaxed when you're playing music, singing? What does it actually do to you personally?
Music has for me, music is like a switch. So when you play it, it can 100% transport you. Music is almost like smell. It's like if you hear a piece, you can remember where you were and what you were doing. That was when I was at high school. That was when I just graduated. You know, it just takes you back. It's like a diary of your life. When I went to the Philippines after they had the Tacloban tsunami, and the place was razed to the ground, and I don't even think that the camera crews could even show you the genuine decimation. We were just standing there with the rest of the charity crew with our tarpaulin and nowhere to tie it to, because there was no way that we could make shelter. Everything was decimated. One thing that will always hit me is when we were surrounded by these children, they just started singing Raw. Like, it's so powerful.
My God, sorry.
Really touching.
Yeah, because they just wanted to sing and share and feel strong.
There's an enormous power in collective voice, isn't there? I always get that with a choir.
But to sing a song about the eye of the tiger, I have the power, and it's just, when I hear that song, I just think, crikey, I think of them all the time. But you're right, it's collective voice, and they had nothing. They didn't even have somewhere to sleep. But by singing that song together, and You're Gonna Hear Me Roar, I just think they were just children we were standing at the graves of their mothers, and they were singing that song. It's so powerful. Music is so powerful.
Because I think there's an assumption that, when you're sad, you listen to sad music.
No, this was a roar. This was a roar. I say all of this. I mean, I got fired being the church organist. So there is... music hasn't always been a winner for me.
So I want to put something on the table. I have tried it, sound healing, sound therapy. I tried a gong bath the other day. My mate does it. And I felt a lot calmer. My mood was changed, and I was very skeptical going into it. Have you ever sort of practiced sound healing or sound therapy, or have you heard of it?
It's not something that I've done, but my sister's partial to a gong. She's always got some Tibetan tool. But I find it interesting anyway, because they say that the universe reverberates in E flat, in the key of E flat, and a lot of things things around us work in E flat, and like obviously in space it's a vacuum, you can't hear it, but it makes sense that things would have again a tone. So I can understand why those vibes or those tones would maybe relate to you, and if you can block out other sounds, you know. And I suppose people hear sounds in different ways. Like I will hear when somebody speaks, I can pitch where they're speaking, and I think if it's just something that I suppose, you know, that speaks to you or just relaxes you, I'll try anything.
Can we try it, Kimberley? Can you give her a voice note? And
Well, no, it's more like when you're saying, can you give her a voice note?
Oh,
You're not
okay.
saying, I can hear that some people have got quite musical voices.
I feel a bit basic right now. Sorry.
It's very aware
I'm like-
now of your tone.
I can just about bang out "Happy Birthday."
No, it's more, I just find it fascinating because some people are really, really expressive in the way that they speak, and some people speak on a monotone, and
Yeah.
some people hold back their voices. Some people don't feel they have a voice. Some people are really loud. And
It's
that's
funny
their own
because
musicality.
the way you communicate, you know, you have you're very physical in the way you
Yeah.
communicate as well. Like you've always gesticulated,
I was
and-
knocking something
Yeah.
over and
and making more sounds wherever you go.
I don't know where that comes from, but yeah, and I'm like, no, I'm realizing that I am, hands. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think people have their own way of of communicating and being quite musical.
Because I think there's Tibetan sound bath, I think it's called, or singing bowls. That's what your sister does, isn't it?
Yeah.
My friend does the gong bath, which is the big kind of Buddhist therapy. And then there's the tuning forks that I think people use just to help release tension, apparently.
Crystal bowls and...
But I mean, you know, it sounds lovely. And I have done the gong bath and I feel it has helped calm me down to an extent. But also I was just lying down for half an hour and not hearing children. So, you know, either one. Is there any sense in this or scientific research behind it?
So some of the theory or the kind of postulation about sound therapy is that, you know, we have energy frequencies and that the music can tune into those frequencies and reset them. Now, there isn't strong evidence for that. But essentially, it's exactly that how is it, can you separate the gong or the tone from the lying down, from the lovely soothing person, from the group of people who are here for the same thing, from the candles, from the crystals, from the entire environment? Possibly not. There isn't really strong evidence for it, but basically, if it's going to help you relax, and as long as you're not eschewing kind of actual treatment, if you're talking about kind of a clinical concern or an issue, then I feel like, if it rocks, then roll.
I mean, it could be a bit like tinnitus if it's not your thing, but if Beyonce, sticking on Beyonce and singing in the car has the same effect, then
Yeah.
do whatever works for you, I say.
Whatever takes your fancy. We're not here to
Everyone's got
judge.
their thing.
Everyone's got a thing. And I think one of the things we really wanted to talk to you about, and we've sort of touched on behind the scenes, having a chin wag, is the pressure that you're under. Like you've been on the spotlight since I can remember. You've been on my wall. Bedroom wall. You started there, our journey together. And then I remember finding you again on Instagram when I kind of got stuck into Instagram as a mum. And I thought, oh, there's Myleene, she's a mum. And, I think there felt perhaps at that point that there was a lot of pressure on you as a mum and a broadcaster and a singer. I mean, how did you navigate that? And were there any sort of wellness techniques you had around to help you through that time?
I think is it because I became a mum or is it because I just got older? But there does come a point where you just don't have the space for everyone's opinions. You barely have enough space for your own opinions. And your kids certainly have opinions. So I think you learn very quickly, it just doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter, you just file it under, it doesn't matter. And
well, it's what Ricky Gervais said the other day, wasn't it? He said, just because you've got an opinion doesn't mean it's right. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's a big revelation, isn't it?
well, it's what they say, dead people and being dead and being stupid are one and the same thing because it only hurts the people around you.
That's so true. But how do you block that kind of, I would probably describe it, having been online for a while, as white noise at times, like where you can maybe ignore it. You can maybe, as you were saying earlier, for your daughters go, no, this hasn't affected me, but it does. It breaks through.
I think having daughters and wanting to show them how to deal with it, because isn't it what they say, 90% what they see, 10% what you say? they see you doing it. And if they were to see me just falling apart because somebody said I had bad hair or cellulite that day, I mean, what am I teaching them? It just doesn't make any sense. So I suppose that evaluation has definitely come from that as well. And here's the thing, if I don't read your comment or I don't react to it, it just doesn't matter. And sorry,
I was talking about, have you thought about when your daughters, I know they're young now, but when they would end up on social media, have you kind of preempted that?
Well, I've shown them. I said to my daughter once, I said, things, if people say things that are upsetting, what do you think about that? And she says, well, if you're not upset, then I'm not upset. And I thought, well, that's it. That's it in a nutshell. If I show that I'm falling apart because somebody thinks something awful about me, having never met me, then it's completely ludicrous. And if that's how I'm going to show her to react to things like that, then it's not really leading her.
We must learn from them, I think. I think there's we can be quite patronising towards children, and they're actually just little adults often in small bodies. And I remember when I was really young, my dad said to me, he said, you should never really put people on a pedestal and you should never look down on people. You should look straight ahead, keep going, treat the Queen as you would the bin man and, keep going on your way. And I think that's kind of easier pre-internet, but...
Well, no, he's right. It's funny you say that because I brought my daughters, one of their first performances was, actually their first performance, threw them in at the deep end, was for Prince Charles. And I spent most of the performance, well, just the preparation towards it. We showed up and we did our practice. I was terrified for them. And Hero, and I said, you're going to meet the future king, and Hero wants to be an RAF pilot, obsessed with flying. And she's like, I'm going to talk to him about his sons and flying. And she was off. And we walked into this room, and everyone that was there were people in my childhood that, I've really looked up to, like Andrew Lloyd Webber. Got even more nervous thinking, my poor children, they're going to be performing on the piano in front of Andrew Lloyd Webber and all of these celebrities, and there's Prince Charles. I swear, from the minute we walked in that room to the minute we left, all Hero talked about was, who's going to eat the last Danish pastry? Are you sure there's going to be some Danish pastries left, though? Do you think they're going to save me a Danish pastry? She couldn't have cared less about the performance, to the point that I found myself asking Amanda Holden, do you mind running over and getting her a Danish pastry and just putting it aside so when she's finished she can... And then it's a real leveller, because it just didn't matter to her. So it didn't matter.
So that kind of anxiety you talk about, you must have felt that. I mean, before, when you said you kind of came up onto that stage in Wembley, I mean, that's a big moment. And you've just described, playing in front of Prince Charles. That's quite a biggie. Plus all the other things that you've done, a little bit of hearsay and there. So how have you, what little tips or routines have you kind of gone through to get yourself into a kind of level place, perhaps when you're feeling anxious or when you're not feeling completely in control of things, maybe?
I mean, I've had so many scenarios where it's gone wrong and I'm still here. So that's what I just think of. I had a performance once where a footballer's wife stood too close to the open candles that were around my piano, and just as I was walking on stage, her hair extensions caught on fire. And
Sorry,
I didn't and I didn't really think. And so I just put her out with my hands. And I walked on stage with black charcoal hands. And if you've ever smelt burning plastic, it smells awful. And as that started to waft over the crowd and I stood there with my hand, I had to tell them what had happened and then play. And nobody was listening because everyone was trying to figure out whose hair had caught fire and trying to get through the awful smell of burning hair and plastic.
But I mean, can I just have a moment for the courage and the inner strength it must have taken to
go
with your bare hands towards someone's burning extensions?
No,
Can we
I
have a moment?
myself. I always think I should have drop and roll.
Next time, just rugby tackle her and.
But I'm talking about things like that, just before a performance. Just as I was walking up the stage, I just saw her and she spun around, and it was in that second.
But I think you have to be in quite a good space to actually be able to deal with things not going right. So, in terms of health, in terms of wellness, in terms of exercise, perhaps, how do you keep yourself fit and able to put your bare hands on someone's burning extensions?
Footballer's wife's hair extensions. I think, and I've become, again, really aware of this, having children, that there is no point of me saying to them, go out and exercise, go and jump on the trampoline as I have been doing in lockdown, and not looking after their heads. Because if I don't know what's going on in their heads and I don't know what their fears are and I don't know if things are maybe getting on top of them, it's so important that we have those conversations. So on Saturday mornings, we take a bit of time out and we sit around the table after we've had our pancakes and we do mama school. We do mama school, and I've done this for years. And we will do anything that I think will empower them. Or I'll talk about something that's going on culturally, or I'll talk about something that's going on politically and see if they understand it. So we covered what was going on, what goes on with the elections, or what's going on with COVID, and I explain it to them and they can ask their questions, or I'll show them the fuse box so they feel empowered enough to be able to run the house. We do something called household budget with pasta pieces, and they love it. We have to always start with it now, where I'll give them all some pasta pieces and then that will be the money. And I'll say, right, we're going to run the house. So give me the rent or give me the mortgage, and then put it in the bowl. And then I'll say, right, give me the electricity, the gas, give me uniforms and food, and then keep putting it into the bowl until I wait until they have one piece left. And I'll say, that is for you to go to the cinema or to go with your friends. Oh, no, we've got a flat tire. And then they'll go, but this is so unfair. And I'll say, and that is how you run a household. But my view on it is if I can empower them and give them answers that I didn't necessarily get. My mum and dad tried to keep any money worries or bills away from us because they wanted us to be children. But children are too savvy now. And I think it's actually really important to say, right, well, this is how you run a household, especially when, you know, I was a single mum for, you know, and I still will always think of myself as a single mum. But I think that if you feel empowered, or if you feel that you can do something, you don't feel helpless. And I think the worst thing in the world is to feel helpless. So your body might be fit, but if your mind feels helpless, then you're going to start crashing.
I kind of want to live in your household because I kind of
My
need some
kids
of
will
those.
say no.
I'm like, can you just help me out with my tax returns a bit with the pasta?
No, but this is the thing. Do you know, it was quite funny because I did Hero's hair the other day and I'd done one bunch. And she went, look, Mum, you've taxed my hair. She'd understood it. It'd just been cut. And I thought, that's quite a mature joke. And obviously I hadn't taxed her hair, but I knew what she was trying to say, that I'd just lopped a bit of it off. And I just thought, well...
That's so important, though, because so many of us kind of go into life without these basic skills, like basic life skills, whether it's finances or knowing how to cook, you know, a handful of meals, or even what big ones for me, which is helping people, understand their emotions, but also to have difficult conversations. And I think, like, most of what you want is on the other side of a difficult conversation, whether it's talking to your partner about something about the relationship, whether it's asking for a pay rise, whether it's, you know, telling your bank manager that you're going to have difficulties or something.
We role play all those things that you've said because I've done those. I've had to ask for a bank loan when I went to music college. My parents couldn't afford it. And I tell the girls, because they think it's so funny, that I went in my finest. Because I thought, if I go to the bank and I've got this really good, they're going to go, we should give her money. It never occurred to me that they'd think, well, that's where the money went. Or, who's she kidding? If she's got all of that, why is she asking for money? And they think it's really funny. But those things, you know, and actually, because of hearsay, I went back to my bank manager in my really cool UFO trackies, because that was what hearsay brought to the party.
You're like, give me money.
And I paid my money back. That's how I paid off my student loan, which is something else I
that
also
must have
think.
been a really big moment.
Oh, I was like...
You were like...
Did you dance in it?
I did. I felt like a baller in the club. Here's my student loan. I have no money left again for another month now.
But in terms of like big pivotal moments in your career, and there's been quite a few, was there ever a moment where you thought, okay, you know what, I need to recalibrate things at this moment? Like we've spoken to Matt Willis from Busted, and he was saying he partied a lot in Busted. And, you know, how was it in Hearsay? Was there a point where you maybe got to having partied too much? And you're like, no, I was counting my pasta.
No. Hearsay was constant fear.
Was it?
Constant fear. We were so paranoid about everything, all of us, that when I look back, I actually want to mum us all. I actually just want to go.
What were you afraid of?
People selling stories non-stop, who to trust. And the catalyst for so many of these stories, we would read the newspapers every weekend. Because again, was that a good thing for us to be doing? And we didn't have a right to reply either, that you have something so instantaneous now. And it's not a massive moan. It's just we didn't know how to look after ourselves.
It was overnight for you guys in a completely.
It was instantaneous. And I've said it before, but we didn't change, the people around us did. Because we had a number one and we had no money in the bank. It took hearsay to pay off my student loan, but we had a number one.
So something we've spoken to every guest that's come on this podcast is obviously Arla LactoFREE is supporting this podcast, and they're really all about sort of overcoming life's challenges and finding your inner strength. Where have you sort of found, I suppose, that inner strength that I think comes across just in the way that you've explained how you parent, for example? I don't know many parents that go, right, we're going to have a bit of mum school.
I think that's empowerment. I think any woman, especially, like, I can only speak as a woman, but it's interesting when my boyfriend, he sits in on mama's school too, and he's like, this is epic. I could have done with, household budget. The other day I was teaching them how to start a car with spark leads, just how to,
Brilliant.
just show them how to do it.
So casual.
Well, no, they need to know. I don't want them to be stuck on the side of a motorway thinking I'm helpless, because you're not.
Wow.
So it's things like that that I just want them to know. I do the air on my friends' tyres because they don't know. And I've got friends who just don't want to know because their husband does it. But I've been in a position where I do everything. So I don't want to ever feel like it's not a control thing, far from it. It's just knowing that I can do it if I need to.
I love that you do all of your friends' tyres. Of all the things that I imagine coming up on this podcast.
I do my friend's tyres because it annoys me because I get in her car and then I see the little signal and I'm like, why have you not, it's been a week, why have you not pumped that up? So I don't want us to have a blowout. And so, yeah. My dad was in the Navy. When you've been raised as a Navy brat, you just... And my mum was an NHS nurse, so...
Okay, that's where the strength... That seems
Well,
like
your
where
arm could be falling off and you're still going to school. That's what it is.
And I think we touched on this earlier, just in terms of the pandemic. You were saying, it's been very, very difficult as parents, but then you suddenly look at NHS key workers.
Yes.
And you're...
I have many friends who are nurses because of that. And I just think, I know what they're doing, so we can all go again and again. But you talk about gut. I haven't always listened to my gut instinct, and that should have, in its own right, been a sign. And I talk about this a lot with my girls as well, because it's there for a reason. It's that primal, it's just been implanted into us. And it's more convenient, I think, for us to not listen to it sometimes.
And I think also when we're not eating properly, so a lot of people don't know they're lactose intolerant, and we've spoken to a few people on this podcast who suddenly overnight, they got diagnosed with lactose intolerance and then they shifted everything. They started eating Arla LactoFREE's soft cheese, which we were saying, I put it on pasta the other day. It's really nice lactose-free carbonara. There you go. You can have that food tip for free. You can tell I'm not a food blogger. But I think, when we are operating, our bodies are operating better and we're eating better and we're listening to our bodies, our gut instinct becomes clearer, there's clarity of thought. Is that correct, Kimberley? Or am I speaking out of my derriere?
Smushing a couple of things together.
Okay. Decode it.
But I think there is an overlap. So first of all, absolutely, that the gut instinct, in terms of the physiology of it, is inbuilt. So we have the gut-brain axis connection through the vagus nerve, but also through the kind of indirect ways in which the gut and the brain are related to each other and talk to each other in this bi-directional communication. But we think about gut instinct as really having a good sense of your emotions, that immediate response of your emotions. And your emotions are physiological. They are in your body. They are embodied. And it's about really, in a sense, trusting yourself, and not wanting to override the messages or the information that's coming from your body, from your, the unconscious part of you, with that very rational. We all want to be very rational, very cool, very clever. I've thought this out, and this is the most logical response. What we don't really appreciate is that you cannot make good decisions without utilizing your emotions, right? You can't make a decision that's right for you without actually combining your cognitive thoughts with your emotions, because it's your emotions that gives your decisions meaning, right? So whether you want chicken or fish for dinner doesn't matter unless you connect with what I want, what will be best for me, what do I fancy?
What will make me happy?
What will make me happy? And the more you can tune into that, the more you can trust that, then the more likely you are to be able to trust your gut and go with it.
So when did you last follow your gut instinct, would you say? Most recently?
Crikey, I listen to it more so than ever now, especially when it comes to raising my baby. So yes, I've never had a boy before, but having a baby at the stage of life that I'm at now, there's more critique, I suppose, online, and more opinions cast. And I think beforehand, because I'd think, well, that lady says she has 4 children, so she must know better than me, or she must have seen something that I've missed, and you start to doubt yourself. And now I think it comes with confidence, and yes, like I said before, age and a bit more experience. But I think ultimately, well, you've never met my baby, you can't possibly know what he wants more than I do. I have to trust myself there. So there's been those choices. There's been career choices where I just think, well, do you know what? It might look good on paper, as you were saying, but actually it's not going to make me happy. So I'm going to actually go in this direction.
I think that came as soon as I had my first child.
You don't have time.
You're like, I don't have time for you to judge me right now, because I'm kind of judging myself at every step of the way. I'm like, how does this nipple teat go on? That's
doesn't.
quite the image. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing where we kind of connected, was within motherhood, was actually taking that leap of faith to put yourself out there as a mother.
Yeah.
I think there's one thing being in a band, that's one thing. There's one thing being a classical musician. And then there's going out there saying, here I am, a mother. Was there a moment recently where you sort of posted something or put yourself out there as a mother where, it was difficult and you had to find some inner strength and kind of just continue following your instinct that was the right thing to do?
I don't know if it was difficult per se, because I knew that as much critique as it would get, it would also do a lot of good, because it was the kind of picture I want to see. And it's definitely photos of when I've been breastfeeding my baby. And I think the interesting thing with that is Hero looked at one of the pictures and she went, I cannot believe you've posted that. And I said, why? She went, all the mess on the back of the door, everyone's going to see it. She did not see a breastfeeding mother because she's so used to seeing it. She saw all the detritus, all the mess, all the stuff I would have said, can you take that up to your rooms and stop leaving it in the kitchen? And that was it for me. I thought that it's so normal to her, and it should be normal, but to so many, this should be private, this shouldn't be seen, this makes mums feel this and this. And I just thought that's not reason to put it up there at all.
Myleene has said she's been through quite a lot in her career, and obviously as a mother, like, how do our minds kind of shift with big things happening in our lives? I mean, obviously, and also contrasting that to the small things that happen every day.
That's the world's biggest question.
Okay, so talk to me about the mind in terms of big and small things happening.
Well, I think what you seem to be describing is this process of adaptation. And I think what you had was a huge shock going into kind of overnight notoriety and suddenly having to contend with a different version of yourself being reflected back at you. And I think what's really difficult
my God, that's really good. That's really good, because you're cast in a role that you didn't audition for.
Absolutely.
And you think, then, is that me?
Is that
me? That's really
cool.
That's really good, because when I went for the band, I thought I was just going to be singing in a band. But then actually the things that people pay attention to were not the things that you even necessarily thought were important. So you start ignoring the things, but I can play the piano. Yeah, but your hair looks a mess. But I never said
it's really wild. And what it does, or what it did, and what I think you've reclaimed in this really beautiful way, is that sense of agency, right? So that when you spoke about not having a right to reply, suddenly you're just helpless. People are attacking you, they're making decisions about you, they're making comments and accusations about you, maybe selling stories about you, and you can't do anything about it. And you're kind of thrust into this position of vulnerability and helplessness. And that's quite a risky, vulnerable psychological point. And we know that agency, a sense that, I am in control of my life and I have the power to exert that control over my life, is hugely important psychologically. And this is what you're describing now. You're kind of like, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to make the decision not to allow someone to try and take my agency away from me. And I'm going to make sure that my girls know what power they have and the agency that they have in their life, so that they can take that forward. So I think this is the transition, is from being thrust into a position of helplessness into reclaiming of your agency, and that's where you get that sense of confidence.
I know, I could hear her speak all day, every day.
I love that. Do you know, there was one incident where in the band, if it happened now, well, it probably wouldn't have happened now, but there was somebody who is in the public eye, a guy who said that that we dated or that we were seeing each other. And it turns out, I mean, I'd never even met him, but it was something that he and his agent had conjured up. And it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It got the headlines. And I bumped into him. And, it was a while later, I bumped into him. And I was just... I never really thought, what would I actually say to him? Because the whole thing was nonsense. But he dropped all his files, and he was the coward that I thought he clearly was.
Yeah.
But I just thought, you know what, you couldn't get away with that now. I would be able to turn around and say, when? When did this happen? Why do you think it's okay to put this out there?
Yeah.
Why are you using my power to climb your ladder and just to climb up upon me? It's all those things that at the time I wasn't able to respond to, and just had to sit there and take it and wait until the next weekend when the next headline would come. And I look at that now and I just think, well, even if we've come that far now and that we have got a voice, to not have a voice other than feeling helpless is one of the scariest things that you can ever have. And I think more so than ever, there are many countries that don't have voices still, or women are not heard. And I think that's something that, again, we are really, really lucky to have, but we shouldn't allow it to be dumbed down or given a more polite version, a sanitized version of.
And it feels like, to be honest, in everything that you've said, that, we spoke about a seeming trend, which actually is steeped in ancient tradition, that sound healing. But actually, it feels like that's been a backdrop to your whole life, that actually you haven't been practicing this big trend. It's actually been weaved into every moment of your life. And it's perhaps, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've got from our conversation, is that it has centered you in places, when probably someone was talking about your hair. You're like, nope, I'm playing the piano and I'm going to leave it on this island.
Well, I suppose it's something that I can always come back to, and you can say you can take chunks out of me, you can pick away and whatever else, so when the vultures circle, but at the same time, I know what I can do because it's physical. I can see that I can do it. So I can sit at that piano and put the hours in. You can take away or try to or critique, but I can do it. So that evidence, it speaks for itself. It's solid. And for me, when I sit and I play, and I find I always go back to music. And you're absolutely right. It is a centre. It might not be a gong, but
it's your own gong.
It's an anchor.
It's the line, isn't it? Hear me roar. It's.
What I've loved on this podcast is that we've had such eclectic mixes of things that people have done, like under the kind of wellness umbrella. And, I think there's so many fads and so many buzzwords out there, when actually a lot of it is weaved into everyday life. So, for example, Eddie Hall, the world's strongest man, he talks about sort of eating just a whole chicken in a sauna. Whatever you do, you, babe. But is there anything, just as we're coming to the end of the podcast, that you can let our listeners know about how you do unwind? Because I look at your schedule sometimes.
Is that what he does to unwind? The chicken in the sauna?
I mean, there's no, it's a safe space here, Myleene. You can...
I hate that I've never even considered it.
I just feel like there's a whole wellness book on like sauna chicken, relaxation.
Chicken in a sauna.
Chicken in a sauna. That's your next song. If you can just riff off that. But yeah, how do you unwind?
Do you know, I just, it's really simple. I don't need to do anything too drastic. I just like to just take a minute alone. Like, I don't remember the last time I did sit and drink a hot coffee. There it is again. It's just those little simple pleasures. If I can get through a hot coffee and just sit down for a minute and maybe just, catch up with friends, those little things, or just sit and talk to my partner.
Just change their tyres. Just
change my... So when I first met my boyfriend, he left his car outside and his tyre was flat, and he didn't leave the we'll remember this, the locking nuts, the wheel nuts. He didn't leave his little key for it. But he was just so chuffed that I tried to change his tyre, and we bonded. But yeah, I think it's genuinely, it's nothing abstract. It's just really simple things. I just like to just sit and be. If I do get a choice, I like to be near the sea. I find things like that. That
comes back to music
powerful.
again, almost, doesn't it? Though, like the sound.
I absolutely love the sound. Whether it's boats, whether it's walking past the sea, whether it's just, I grew up near the sea. It's that to me is really powerful, really powerful.
Well, I am going to invite you to my next gong bath, where we can
On a
be.
boat.
Can you imagine on a boat by the sea,
Chicken a la spa.
chicken, with the world's
Rotisserie.
strongest man and a chicken? That is a book. It's been so lovely to have you on the podcast, Myleene. Thank you so
you.
much. I mean,
I
there's been
feel-
tears, there's been pasta. You-
A whole journey.
I feel like you've signed up to do my tax returns and change my tyres.
We're all going over for mum's school.
Come for mum's school. Come for mum's school.
We've had it all, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
You've
for having me.
been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The W Word, W for Wellness. I'm Anna Whitehouse, and I've been joined by Kimberley, who speaks all the sense, and the brilliant Myleene. We've been talking gut
just
health.
speaks.
Who just speaks.
No thanks.
We've been talking about gut health, we've done sound healing, we've done something new, chicken saunas. If we're going to talk about buzzwords, I think that's the new one. But if you would like to let us know if you enjoyed this podcast, just go to Arla LactoFREE's social channels, get stuck in, get involved in the conversation, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.